This is called 3 minutes. When one of your most supportive slam poet friends says you can cut down all of your longer poems to 3 minutes, this means you haven't yet written the poem that shows them otherwise. When most of the writing workshops you've attended tell you exposition belongs in documentaries, not in poems, remember that the people who run those workshops aren't the boss of poetry. You are. You are the final boss of poetry. When you're... Okay, man. All right, sorry. You are the final boss of poetry. When your readers have burned through 100 tries to whittle down your life bar and your flashing foretells your destruction in a sequence of game-ending explosions, the background music cuts out, the display fades to black, but then your second life bar extends all the way across the top of the screen. Your battle theme begins anew at twice the speed, a power metal remix backed by ominous Latin chanting as you reveal your ultimate incarnation. That's right. You've only been using 60% of your power. That wasn't even your final form. Now is the time to break through your limits. This is the time to touch the untouchable and kick reason to the curb. Now this is pod racing. You are a technologically improbable hover chair comprised of 2 freestanding jet engines connected to an open cockpit by a pair of steel cables, harnessed together by arcs of violet lightning. You are a space wizard's vorpal sword and your blade is made of plasma. This isn't science fiction. This is badass. This is poetry. Some people write poems about birds and the moon, and that's cool. You're gonna write poems about other stuff, like video games, religious family trauma, and the airspeed velocity of an unladen European swallow. You can keep this fine circus of energy going. Always look on the bright side of life. Continue quoting Monty Python or switch to karaoke song lyrics. You can let the good times roll, but it's always cloudy except for when you look into the past. If what we dwell on is who we become, then doesn't that make me a Fallout boy? Maybe I imagine dragons because my head's become radioactive from the legion of half-lives decaying inside of my thanks for the memories. Maybe that's why I can imagine Dungeons and Dragons so easily in the first place. Both awaiting me in the near future. The dragon great and red, the one with 7 heads, 10 horns, and 7 crowns, the one from all those Bible prophecy sermons I had to sit through as a kid about the 3 angels' message, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and the 7 last plagues, years before I ever snuck out of the house to see a single Star War. If I write a poem about being Asian, how do I explain that I was more afraid of damnation than of scoring low on the SATs? How do I say that the God I was raised to worship was also Asian because, just like our parents, he saw anything less than a perfect score as a moral failure? Life was never whatever we can make of it. Life is a test. Life is pass or fail. And plenty of people who think they are saved will discover when the Lord Christ Jesus returns that they were mistaken. So if you don't attend our prep courses and spend your evenings and weekends memorizing the specialized content of our curriculum, you'll end up failing the final exam of salvation, said the men with the suits and the Bibles. If I write a poem about being Filipino, how do I say I wasn't raised Catholic? I was raised to believe that the Catholic Church would influence the governments of the world into instituting the global law of mandatory Sunday worship, specifically for the purpose of persecuting the one Protestant denomination out of the tens of thousands in existence who understood the secret codes in the Bible well enough to qualify as God's true remnant church, and that the only future the righteous should desire is an afterlife, lying on the far side of an age of apostasy where Satanists burn Bibles in the streets because that was what every adult I knew believed to be true. Won't I lose the audience once I stop piling on as light and zesty smorgasbord of pop culture references, none of which I was ever meant to recognize, because why would any follower of God waste their time familiarizing themselves with the temptations of a sinful world? Why would a poet try formulating the aftermath of an upbringing molded by a religious fundamentalist community who put every ounce of their hopes into awaiting the final judgment of a God who would kill you for getting your ears pierced or eating bacon, who would make the rest of your family watch you burn to ash for worshiping him on the wrong day of the weekend afterwards? Jesus will show them a book containing every sin you ever committed, every wicked thought that ever popped into your head, and then they'd stop grieving you, knowing you never would have belonged in the paradise their loving God created just for them, and therefore oblivion was the most merciful eternity you could possibly deserve. If instead of all that, I just say I grew up in a cult, wouldn't that hurt my mother's feelings? And isn't that the greatest controversy? That I've had to choose between attempting to be heard and sparing for what passed for my family's peace ever since 3rd grade, where I learned that the pilgrims sailed to the New World seeking religious freedom, but in the modern day, the choice of what to believe in was no longer necessary because I was blessed to be born into the one religion that knew all the right answers, and if I felt that Seventh-day Adventism wasn't for me, then that right there, that doubt was the voice of Satan in my head. So if I didn't drown out the devil with prayer, I'd end up separated from my family forever, and it would be all my fault for not loving God enough to get accepted into heaven. Maybe I'm not cut out to be a slam poet, or a page poet, but I'm going to be some kind of poet. Because if the God-fearing community that raised me had been successful in their efforts, I never would have written a single poem. After all, there are 150 chapters of Psalms written in the only book worth reading outside of class. I should be reading one of those at a pulpit instead of one of mine at a mic stand. I should be cutting out these last 6 stanzas to keep this poem fun, free of exposition, and under 3 minutes, just as God intended. But instead I'm writing a book And even as I write, even as I speak, you can tell that I've been born again, because my second life bar and my third life bar extend. No, a parabola in prismatic stereo overhead, a double rainbow all the way across the sky. Yeah, because I'm the final boss of poetry, and this isn't even my final form.